Welcome to the Honest Hounds podcast.
The Honest Hounds podcast. We are here today to talk a little bit about fear aggression. It's an interesting topic. It's one that we're hearing a lot about. We're on tour at the minute, so we've been travelling around lots of different locations. I think we're on location number 11, and lots of the conversations that we're having with dogs that have got overreactivity towards dogs and humans is we're hearing this phrase, fear aggression. So I'm Jessie.
I'm Jess.
I'm sure.
So let's dive in and have a little think. Jess, from a dog training point of view, in the years that you've been working, what is your experience with the phrase fear aggression?
Well, I think that we need to define some words, and typically the word reactive is being used to soften aggression because people don't like the word aggression these days, and also aggression signifies the character rather than behaviour. So when we talk about aggressive behaviour, we're talking about the behaviour the individual's doing in that moment. So when you're working with complex children, you can identify aggressive behaviour. And when we're working with dogs that have some behavioural issues, there can be times where they have aggressive responses. So the word reactive is really tricky to use because if you're not reacting, you're dead. You react to everything. If the doorbell goes and you hear it and you move towards the door, that's a reaction. Not always negative. Aggression is the intent to harm, and when we're thinking about aggression on a scale of, for me, I look at it on a scale of stress. Fear is the opposite end of that spectrum. So fearful behaviour is moving away. So typically you'd see a dog flatten its ears, lean slightly back. He might bare his teeth, and as a reaction, as a last response to say, I'm completely cornered. But that tends to overlap with dogs being restricted or restrained. And we're seeing a lot of dogs that are more reactive or showing aggressive response on a lead than they are when they're free to do have choices of their own, which is, I would like to move away from this situation.
And I think that's a really interesting point, isn't it? Is that when we're thinking about what that looks like in a character, if you've got something that is fearful and it's trying to move away, it's trying to create space, whereas the opposite of that would be a lot of the dogs that we're seeing that are coming out and going, barking and lunging and moving towards the thing. I guess a good one to tag into you, so your experience of the human side of things. Is it the same in the human world when, in terms of restriction and the responses that people choose?
No. It's people find it much easier to see with humans. So I worked with children with challenging behaviour. I specialised in positive challenging behaviour support, and one of the main thing we used to communicate to people was that a behaviour is something that communicates a need, and then you look at what the behaviour is doing and what that will help them to achieve. So if I'm saying I'm scared, I don't want to be here, what I'm not doing is running headfirst into that situation. Used it a few times over the last few days. Like the big example is people saying, oh, he's only aggressive because he's scared. If you're scared and you're going to a party or going to a new place, you don't go, I'm scared. What I'm going to do is walk in and punch the first person I see in the face. But for dogs, that's what people put onto it.
You don't find the term fear aggressive in the human world?
No, we'd never, like, of all the different, like, behaviours versus needs, you'd never be like, the reason this is happening is because they're scared if what was happening was very forwardly aggressive. It might be if you pin someone into a corner and they might lash out to try and back you off. That's different. You of all the children I've worked with and everything I've done, I've never seen or never heard an experience where someone has gone, this young person was really scared, so they ran at me and punched me in the face.
And do you think that's because we give humans more options to move away? So we've got dogs now that are confined to leads because we're not confident about them. We get worried, we get concerned.
Another layer of it, isn't it? That the fear actually is the human fear. And that's why we restrict. If we restricted humans as much as you restrict dogs, we would see a lot more aggressive responses.
Whereas you would naturally be going, okay, we'll give you the space, go off and process it.
Yeah.
We can't often do that in the environment with the dog.
Yeah. So then the main aspect for human stuff was it was always the least restrictive, least physical intervention necessary. And we tend to do the opposite with dogs. If your dog is outwardly aggressive, it's like, well, let's put 50 things on that dog rather than look at what's actually going on to try and help it. So it's just adding more and more things instead of going, well, actually, we can do these things to remove that. But I think the reason we do it for humans and not for dogs is that we give humans a lot more credit than we give dogs. Even like I worked with severely mentally and physically handicapped children, and they were given a lot more credit for being able to manage their emotions than we give dogs. And actually, for a lot of them, they can't manage their emotion, which is where the challenging behaviour comes from. Whereas if dogs are given the opportunity, like our dog particularly is showing us, the more opportunity we give him to manage his own emotions and behaviour, the more able to do that he is sensibly and safely.
So with humans, you've got the lack of physical restriction. You've also got the understanding that they're very different individuals. Some individuals have behavioural challenges. Some have chemical imbalances that are leading to behavioural challenges. And so when you say manage emotions in a dog, I think a lot of people, assuming first that the dog isn't smart enough to figure out what's going on, haven't realised and also normalised, they're very much normalised aggressive responses. So when we see a dog barking and lunging, that's an extreme reaction. If you saw the equivalent in a human being, whether adult or a child, we would have a very much a whoa response, whereas we're so normalised to it and the owners are so normalised to it that we switch off. So we're then not recognising and not responding to the severe stress that individual's under.
And I think it's really interesting, isn't it, if it happens gradually. So I'm thinking about the puppy that we all met last night. She is absolutely at the minute going, "Hello, everybody," and she's barking and she's excited and she's at the end of her lead, so she's coming forward. And at the minute, that's not aggression. It's like, "Oh, I want to say hi." But if we've seen it a lot of times before, if we keep that happening, if we hold her back, if we limit her interactions with other dogs, but she's getting little bits of it, we're going to start to get frustration. So I wonder if a lot of people are seeing that journey and they're seeing the dog that was excited. And so the idea of then pattern matching that to aggression is like baffling.
Doesn't make any sense.
Because they've not seen it spill over.
Absolutely. So there's a point in time where that frustration comes to a head. And so it's probably going to be another dog that then comes in and attacks it, which actually is just a correction to say, you're way overboard. No one has dealt with this yet. I will. And then the owner of that dog then says, well, that aggressive reaction has caused a chain reaction. My dog is now behaving aggressively. It must have been because it was scared of what happened, rather than it's a learned behaviour because it's gone frustration. Well, that felt good. Maybe I'll do that. And then you've got pathways in. We've got pathways in dopamine. And the more that's practiced, the much harder it is to undo. And then you perhaps will go to a trainer who says, well, we'll correct for the behaviour rather than finding out where the behaviour's stemming from. We'll correct for that and still restraining. So there's no way the dog's having its ultimate need met. So it would have not become aggressive had it had less restriction, more role models to teach it how to behave. As I said yesterday in the gathering that we had of Seafall, and not really anybody picked me up on that. And I'm not sure the owner did either. I actually was thinking about it last night, about this puppy. She's a big fun little puppy. And no one picked me up on that. What I said was, it's politically incorrect for me to do what I need to do to help this puppy. So I would have attacked it. So I would have gone towards it and used my pressure with my body, not necessarily touched it, but helped her not rush into dogs. Rather than holding her back and restricting her, I would have gone up front and taught her that it's not acceptable. So we saw a little bit of that from the dachshund, where she met two puppies, and this puppy, she bared her teeth at and said, "Give me space. I do not like that energy. You'll hurt me if you come closer to me." And the puppy's response was to lie down, but she was still restrained. The owner doesn't want her to meet dogs because she might hurt them. And the other puppy was very calm, and the dachshund had a happy response. She was like, well, I'm curious yet. She still kept her distance, but she was curious about her. Whereas with the larger puppy, I do not want to go near that. And it requires the owner to have that understanding that the restraint itself is going to cause a stress response, frustration, then a stress response, and then something will happen down the line. And human nature is to blame fear. The human nature is to blame anxiety, rather than going, actually, it's been a build-up over a period of time until the point where something has given. You can't keep going like that forever, so something has to give.
And I think it's really tricky because we're up against not only owners that are doing that, but it's coming from the trainers, right? It's how many owners do we work with when they go, oh, my trainer said it's fear, or my trainer said it's anxiety. And then we know in the human world, in fact, a great question is, how do you see labels impacting behaviour? Once a child has been given a specific label, what's the shift in inherent?
Well, I mean, that was our big thing. So there's no point calling a child a human being an emotion, because emotions fluctuate. So saying this person is angry is relevant, because they might be angry in that exact moment, they might be scared in that exact moment, but that sweeping label means nothing, because you can't be like, that's an angry child, and then they're happy as Larry 2 seconds later. Be like, that's an angry child. But we do it to dogs. We go, that's a nervous dog, and the dog's playing and having a lovely time. People are still like, that's a nervous dog. It doesn't need to be a solid label. What we can label is what's happening, and how they feel about that is sort of not irrelevant, but like, if it's aggression because of fear, if it's aggression because of something else, if it's aggression for whatever reason, doesn't matter. You have to treat the thing. There's no point being like, this is the emotion that's happening, because you can't really things at a core level for people anyway. So just being able to say to people like, okay, yes, they might look scared to you. That doesn't mean someone's feeling scared. It doesn't mean someone's feeling a certain way. But what you can say is that, for an example from a child I worked with, they're headbutting the wall. Whether they're feared, angry, frustrated, annoyed, they've got a headache, and they're able to communicate, it doesn't matter. What we need to do is say, we need the headbutting of the wall to stop, and how can we do that and help someone not need to do that?
I think it's really interesting to think about all the dogs that you've had for training that have come and lived with you. So I'm sure you get all kinds of owners with all kinds of stories. We were absolutely terrified. We were standing 20 meters across the car park going, oh my God, he's going to do something. Is it relevant to you whether they come with fear, aggression or anxiety? What do those first few days look like? How are you assessing that depending on the dog?
Well, I think that, like Sean says, humans like to... There's a label that's helpful for the human to excuse the behaviour, whether it's a parent or a dog owner, and so we see that a lot, don't we? It's a reactive dog, it's a rescue, it doesn't like men, and that's really generalising. In actual fact, you might find that the dog has a reaction towards men who are staring at it rather than all men. So a man could walk past it, no problem, but a man turns its attention to the dog might have a reaction. So it's quite, rather than generalising, we can try and find the specific trigger, and then we can help work around that. So it's useful to look at the small stuff. But on the bigger scale, we zone out. It comes down to stress, whether the dog's having or the child's having a reaction as extreme as a fear response where it's trying to run away and get away from the situation, or an aggressive response where it's going in to say, I will fight. Or it's turned around and it's hurting itself. In that case, that would be an intent to harm itself. So it still comes under aggression to me. So those are all stress responses. And so we look at it biochemically speaking. That's the part of the nervous system that's designed to help the body survive and to stay safe. The problem is that when we get stuck in that and it's unable to, so you called it before, manage emotions, or I would say activate the calming system, activate the parasympathetic nervous response. And when we have that chronic stress happening every single day and it's unable to regulate, then something has to come in externally to help. So regardless of what the label is to me, I see it as stress. And when we label it as stress, it's much easier for us to say, how do I help the dog move out of stress? So if you have the dog that you think is fearful, change the wording to my dog is stressed, and it's much more likely that you'll go, actually, the dog doesn't have to be stressed. I can help it do things, or I can learn how to help it do things to feel not stressed.
And I think the key thing is understanding the science pathways. So once you realise that the more that they practice the behaviour, the more likely they were to get that behaviour again. It no longer really matters why or where it's coming from, because we just have to go, okay, well, this is the thing that they're practising. How do we get them to start doing something
that is
else?
The key. So if we go back to that German Shepherd puppy last night, and it's lunging forward to say hi to dogs, and the behaviour at the moment as a puppy is non-threatening to most dogs and most humans. In fact, the human response is to go, oh, it's tiny, and she's saying, oh, sloppy ears, but what it's doing is it's practicing that behaviour, and pathways are being set that that's the behaviour I'm going to do as an adult. And one of the things that we are often told is it'll outgrow behaviours. Do you get that a lot with in humans, with children, that it'll suddenly outgrow these behaviours as it matures?
It's a hormone thing. It's a this thing. It's a that thing. It's very rarely, for the most part, when we would speak to people, it's never a how can you help. It's always a, oh, well, let's do these things, and like if this happens, do this. None of it is ever really benefiting the child, first of all. It's about how the parents can cope with what their child is doing. It's not about how the child can feel better. It's, oh, well, if they headbutt, well, why don't you put soft things on the wall so they can headbutt that? Like, so that doesn't help your brain still being rattled around, but the parents feel a little bit better because it's not cutting the head open, and it's the like least amount of actual help for the child, because yes, it slightly removes the amount of damage they're doing, but it doesn't actually help stop them feeling the need to do that damage. Like, if you saw someone headbutting a wall, you're not going to think that's a really happy, okay person. That's a really happy, okay dog if they're slamming their face into the floor. That's not your natural brain thought. So why would the next step not be, let's help them not need to do that? Why is it becomes, well, let's make it, if they're going to do that, let's not worry about it. Let's just try and make it less damaging.
Well, we're seeing the same in the dog world, right? With my dog's pulling on a flat collar, I'll move it to a slip lead. Or now they're pulling on a slip lead, I'll move it to a prong. And it's like, well, actually, we need to be addressing the root, which is the dog doesn't know where to walk when they don't understand pressure. So,
or they haven't been off lead. So we had an example yesterday with a young 15-month-old Wiesla who was trying to be taught to walk to heel. Now, we could have put restraint on her. We could have put tougher tools to help her calm down because she was just so excited to be around everybody. But actually, I think the most ethical thing to do in that moment was to let her off and experience running around. So what I did instead was help the owner be able to let her off lead, get her back, and then after 10 minutes of having that freedom to express herself, we then asked her to come and walk nicely, and she managed to do that. And so every time she practices lunging on the lead, she's reinforcing how to lunge on the lead. But if we allow her to have what she needs and then what we need, which is how to walk on a lead, over time, it becomes very normalised for her to walk on a lead calmly. But if we just expect our needs to be met without the dog's needs being met, I want you to walk on a lead regardless of how much energy you has, especially for a young dog, then we're going to suppress a lot of that behaviour that's going to come out somewhere else. So often the dog ends up redirecting towards the owner, or aggression come out. She hasn't displayed any aggressive behaviours yet, but that might come next. I think he actually mentioned that he felt like she was at the start of turning on him. And he caught that just before, so he was smart enough to realise that that's you can't leave that animal or individual dog, whatever, in that amount of energy without something giving. So I think we just magically think that the dog's going to calm down eventually, but actually it's just everything it's practicing is becoming set with stone, which is much harder to undo. So it's important for us to...
We were told that. I think it's the same in every breed. You get these stupid little pictures and it's like, oh, a Vizsla is a puppy and there's a picture of a dinosaur. And then it's like a Vizsla at 2 and then it's a Vizsla. But then you start to say people, oh, it's supposed to come down at 2. And they're like, oh, not at Vizslas. Vizslas are at 3. And then you get to 3 and you're like, is it 3? And they're like, oh, no, it's actually 4.
Met recently who's got a 9-year-old that had said that she's waiting for him to calm down. And that's... chronic stress, a long period of time that he's not been able to get off lead. He's not been able to have his needs met. We have a lot of expectations for the dog, huge expectations for an animal. You've got to come into coffee shops and settle when I ask you to, and meet strangers that come into your house, and meet dogs, and be friendly to everybody, and be nice with babies, even though you've never met one in your life. If one approaches you, you've got to be nice. We've got so many expectations without the underlying foundations of how to achieve that in the first place. And I think that we start off with the wrong thinking, that if I'm nice to it, I love her, what could possibly go wrong? Only people who abuse their dogs would end up with a dog that was aggressive. Yeah, to them or others. And that's very clearly not the case. But there's such a misunderstanding, I think.
I think that's where the fear comes from, because there's the perception of people who abuse their dogs get angry, bad dogs. Nice people don't get that, so it has to be something I haven't done, so they must be scared, because that excuses the dog's behaviour, but it also helps the humans to feel better.
Mm-hmm.
Like if you can go, oh, my dog just must be scared, that feels a lot better than having to be like, have I done something wrong? Have I hurt my dog? Because I know that from the world that I must have done something wrong and hurt this dog for this dog to be aggressive. And that's not the case at all, but that's what people believe. So then you can say, okay, well, is the dog scared? That takes that weight off of the human shoulders of being like,
It's not my fault.
It's not my fault. The dog's just scared of stuff, and that's why this thing is happening.
Well, we know firsthand to be able to accept that your dog is just getting dopamine from biting you sucks.
That's a very, I'm not sure many of the behaviourists understand what's happening in the brain level. So the neurochemistry for the dog to be have like an enjoyment of repeating that behaviour, which is really tricky to get your head round, especially if you're the owner that's very much not enjoying that response.
And so I guess one that we can add to this clip as well is the video that was when he first came to you. So he was living under your stairs. He's obviously muzzled for safety. And you literally came towards him and his response was very outward, actively trying to attack and trying to bite. But his face, if you watch him, is one of like, oh, geez, like, I'm kind of feral animal at that point.
So really dilated pupils. The giveaway is that any amount of light makes them shine. So if I see any shiny, sometimes red or green, well, the dog's not able to learn in that state. So it's quite horrifying that somebody might maybe try and punish that, because that's not fair. If you've got a human or a dog or any animal in a highly stressed state where he's in survival mode and he's just thinking about how I get through this, adding anything else to that, the only thing we can do is give them space at that point. And that's what I did with him. Like, gave him space, and he got bored and hungry eventually. And he wouldn't eat either. So offering him food in that state, he's not there. And I think that I know of many rescues and people that will leave them alone, but just keep giving them food, and they can stay in that state for many, many months, and in fact, many years until they die. Lots of dogs live in isolation. And what I don't do is allow them to continue to be reinforced for that. So I call it, this is from Dawn, holding the space. So we're holding the space for him, but I know that he'll have a driving force that's stronger than that. His driving force to survive will come from hunger. He's not going to starve himself to death. So when I offer food and he says I don't want to eat it, he knows I've got it. I'll leave with the food. And after a few days, they start to get bored and curious, and their levels of adrenaline and cortisol come down. Then they're able to then start thinking about, well, I need to eat, so I'm going to have to explore out of my cave. But if I keep feeding him in the cave, he's going to live in that cave for a long time, if not forever. And so one of the things that I do differently is to go, well, it's out here. If you want it, come and find me. And then remembering that the dog goes, well, I didn't die. I thought she was going to kill me, but I didn't die. And of course, then they start to see you as, well, you didn't kill me. You've got an opportunity to, and you didn't. But I can't imagine in that state, putting punishment into an animal in that state. I think that, it's quite upsetting to even think about, because you would make it worse. You would make him want to hide even more. You might even get a dog that's refuses to eat for a long, long time. So holding the space for them and allowing them to come out of that when they're ready and able, but not reinforcing them to stay in that by adding food. And the other thing I did for Atlas at that point was I left him milk so that he would have a bit of nutrition and liquids, but he didn't take much of that either.
Yes, there's two. I was just going to say, like, to help people imagine that as a person, like, imagine you had to go to a conference of 1,000 people. You walked, like, you're behind the backstage, you're a little bit nervous, you're getting worked up, and every time you go, okay, I'm stressed, there's a man there that just punches you in the stomach. Like, if you're punishing at that point, that's what you're doing. Nothing is going to get better every time if someone goes, you're stressed out here about this big stressful situation. I know what will help, a dig in the ribs. And that's what, if you start trying to punish, what they're saying, if you're trying to punish the dog in that state rather than give them the opportunity to come out and feel better, it's not going to move forwards. And what we know as people is most of the time, the nerves before doing something are way worse than when you do it. Once you start, you're like, oh, okay, and you relax into it and you learn it's okay. And so the next time the nerves aren't as bad. And so just looking at it as people, that makes life a lot easier for us. If we're like reassured and everything goes well, we can then feel better the next time. if we're punished because we don't get it 100% right, it's going to feel worse the next.
And also, if you're reinforced by someone saying you don't have to go on,
Yeah.
it's not going to get better.
Yeah.
And so I think it's important to address the narratives that we're seeing a lot of the minute. So we absolutely, our previous trainer, we tried to add punishment. And it was kind of explained to us that the dog is doing it because they're enjoying doing it. They're not understanding that it's something they shouldn't do. So if we add punishment a bit, and I guess the way that it was explained before is that if a child's doing something naughty and they don't know it's wrong, then we need to show them that that's not something they can do. So we add punishment, we make it uncomfortable, and we make it so uncomfortable that the dog then doesn't want to do it again. So why is that not a narrative that you're following if that's so popular in the dog world at the minute?
Well, I think one of the things I wanted to say as well, Atlas's case was, I think he's probably now, or maybe 6 months and he was where I've seen most dogs. Now he's very different. He's behaving a lot more normally. But when he first came, I know if you count on one hand how many dogs have been that severe. One of them was a Romanian street dog. But that, he like the feral is the word that you described, and it's not the state I see most dogs at. So he was pretty severe. So, when we think about using punishment in an animal that's that stressed, first of all, we don't have much learning that can take place there for him to reason as to why he's being punished. Yes. And second of all, let's take the child that's banging his head against the wall. If you punish him at that point, he might not want to do the behaviour again, but we're not getting to the root cause of why he's doing it. So he's going to find something else to do.
Yeah. Yeah, and sometimes there is
They might redirect that aggression on him.
And we say the dogs give appropriate corrections, and there is a level of appropriate correction. So I can't allow the child to bang his head against the wall. And that might mean that in that role, I train staff in restraint, we might have to restrain that child and move him away from the wall, get him somewhere safer until we can address the problem, which is where the appropriate level of correction comes in, because you're going to have to say something you can't, and we're using hit and we'll work with children or biting people. And so we have to say, okay, what can we do to protect ourselves? We all wear extra clothes. Step one. Then the young person had people he was less likely to bite. I was that person because I was working a lot with him to understand what was going on. So then the next step, because he at a level must have felt that I was trying to help him, he was less likely to bite me. So then we did that. But if he was going to bite me, I was ready to move into a restraint position, get him into his bedroom and move away and give him time to relax. So that was all necessary, but that was 8 or 9 years ago now, and that has all been worked through and dealt with. And actually the root cause of that was he had acid leaking out of his stomach into his body. His mum was telling doctors that they weren't listening, they're saying wrong. So they got to the root cause of that. From all reports, a lovely boy now, doesn't do that anymore.
And he was
completely non-verbal.
Look,
So-
it was communicating. We weren't listening in a way that we didn't.
And so that's why he was able to then not so people weren't giving him sweets and Christian biscuits and stuff to try and calm him down, because they thought that would help, because they were like, this is a child that's upset. What helps children that are upset? Sweets. When you gave him sweets, it activated the stomach acid. It made everything worse. Obviously, we didn't know that, but I wasn't just giving him sweets. I was giving him other things too. I was working with him and helping him. And so that, yes, I had to use the appropriate correction sometimes. I say to him, come on, you can't be trying to bite me. We're going to need to walk away. We're going to need to go into this half of the building where you're safe, I'm safe, everyone else is safe. But we need to figure out what's going on here. And obviously that's an example where I was never going to figure out what was going wrong, because I wasn't a medical professional. I couldn't go and look inside his stomach.
But you're still looking for solutions as to why, rather than just going, this is an appropriate behaviour, you need to stop this behaviour.
Yeah.
So again, all behaviours serve a purpose. And so if we think about, you can have physical pain, but we can also have emotional pain. And that is so when I met Atlas, I was actually out in the park, and he was responding as a normal dog responds to dogs. A normal dog that hasn't had
Under-socialized.
Yeah, he was under-socialized, but he knew what to do. He's very sexy. He's displaying lots of sexy behaviours and posturing, and very low tolerance for males that would come into his space. I remember he met big dog Rennie, big Maston, and he very much liked her. Like your face was fine. But she's very steady and solid, so there was no issue there. But with males, he was very competitive with. So we've got that, and then we've got the extreme response with the humans. So some things happened along the way to make him go. And in the same now, cuddling up to Athena is not an issue for him to sleep. When he would really struggle cuddling up to a human to sleep. Maybe.
Well, it's interesting. He's a funny boy, but yeah, if he comes in and uses you for warmth, as long as you don't excessively touch him, he's happy to lay with you. But if you start layering on the touch, he'll now go, no, that's too weird, and move away. Whereas before, if you literally moved on the sofa and he caught you moving, he'd be like, that's a threat, buy it.
Just breathe wrong if he was too close to you on the sofa.
It's just, what?
It
was stupid. Don't be like us.
But he also is a good example of dogs being dogs together versus humans with dogs. Athena doesn't touch him. Athena and him just lie down, and so he doesn't have to worry about that. Whereas as humans, we're going to go, she's not trying to stroke. Oh, we'll just stroke you, and then you start ruffling the head, and the dog's like, Atlas specifically, and be like, can you piss off? I'm trying to sleep. Whereas dogs don't do that to each other. Like you would say, we look at what we do to dogs versus what dogs do to dogs.
So I remember part of his change was for, we're always looking at the humans, and I recognise that Paul said, you need a dog that you can pet as we... They're sitting in a restaurant just now, thinking it'd be quiet. What part of the change was that I recognised that you needed a dog that you could cuddle, and he's not going to ever be that dog. He's different, but he's there's moments where he's like, yeah, I'll give affection. Whereas a golden retrievers were much like, whenever you want it, I'm here for it. And so part of that is the mismatch. That's not a dog that is going to be it. He's not a dog that's going to be a dog that people could just cuddle whenever they feel like it, or kids can come throw their arms around. And you very much needed that, and it's part of your healing process. I think that was what you needed, which is why I recommended it. And it's important for us to recognise when we get a dog, we have expectations of what we want from a dog, but not all dogs are going to match that. And so get more dogs.
So let's think about the other side of the coin then. So we've got the punishment, and then the total opposite end of the dog training spectrum is the we'll just stay away from it. So we've obviously just had a week of meeting a lot of dogs and thinking about one dog who came out of the car going, bark, 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 I'm going to be very noisy. And that owner has been told to create space for him. And so I think they said they're working at about a 25-metre distance, where what they've done is gone, bark, bark. Oh, this is fear aggression. If he's fearful, we need to create space. So let's move away, and let's keep moving away until the point that he's no longer barking. And that's the distance that we're working at. And now they're trying to kind of slowly decrease that distance to get him back to being able to be around other dogs. But that's now become such a habit for him.
It's a catch-22. I don't think it's completely wrong to have management. I think that we get stuck in management. So if we go back to the child that's sitting his head against the wall, we put a soft wall in. I think that's great for short term. But if we get stuck in that, again, we're not finding root cause. And the more that he practices that behaviour, the more he's going to do the behaviour. So we want very short term distance. We want to also do other things that are going to help. So I let him on a long line and let him go into the dogs. And he was very keen to say hi to certain dogs. But then I think maybe it was a male, he was very not happy with that. This is the golden retriever we're talking about. And so we've got a mismatch with the owner, because the owner's been told he doesn't like dogs, he's scared of dogs. But actually, I saw the opposite. And I can't help that dog until I get the owner on side. If the owner's not seeing what I see, then
we're stuck.
If I had said to you, Atlas is not eating for a few days, and that's fine. I knew it was going to come right. But I'd said to you, I'm quite concerned, you need to come and take him back. And then I tried again, and then again, and every time he starved himself for 3 days, you would take him back. We actually end up with this cycle, but we never break free from that. And so management is good, but you also have to be doing some tweaks as well, and putting yourself, expanding that comfort zone. So what is natural to dogs? One of the themes that I've been saying this week as I've been meeting all these people is, what would happen if the leaves disappeared and the humans disappeared? What would happen to the dogs? Dogs know how to dog. And it's us that get in the way. And in fact, sometimes we're the instigator of the problem, because we're getting in the way of what they would, what they need to help. They're not as complex as us. They don't have the problem-solving abilities of us, or the future pacing. They're not thinking about what's going to happen tomorrow or the next day. They're very much good at being in the now. But our fear keeps us from allowing them to experience that. And there's lots of ways to experience that. So, muzzling two dogs and putting them together. And I don't recommend that you do this unless you're highly experienced with putting dogs together.
I'm reading body language.
Not what we've been doing every day this week is using dogs that are very stable. So we have a few dogs that are very relaxed in their body language. If a dog's coming at them, they'll go, "What's your problem?" And we also have dogs that will go, "Well, I'll take you on," like that. So finding the right dogs for the right moments is really important to help support the learning of the dog. But then also we're not going in with tight leads going, "Let's see what happens." We're giving space. We're acting as the teachers and appropriately moving dogs as they need to be moved. But we can only do that if the owners are on board. If they're not interested in taking that information in, or if they have become so indoctrinated by what they've learned in the past that they don't want to change, much like your parents sometimes. And we can't help the individual unless we have the people that are living with them on board.
Yeah, and that's it. And it's what you say a lot is the consistency of it as well. If you're going up to a dog that you know and being like, "Yeah, you can do everything with this dog," and your dog is showing you it can be fine, and then you go to the next dog and go, "I don't know this dog," pull the lead back, walk away, be really scared, your dog is going, "I don't know how to react to this, I can't read the situation." And I like to go back to my real experience with like children with autism. It's very similar. Like I hadn't really thought of it until you said then, but like also when you have quite severe autism, living in the moment is a big thing, which is why you'll see lots of people use timetabling for young people with autism and adults with autism, because they don't have the future sight that we have. That's part of what the condition sort of negates a lot of the time. And so you have to be showing them what's coming next a lot. And that is one of the things that really helps with people to be like, "Okay, we're going to finish this, we're going to move to this." And so a lot of the time, the frustration you'll see for people with autism is, "I don't know what's changing here." And the change is really hard. And if you ask anyone that has a child with autism, a friend with autism, a family member with autism, if you say, "If I just start throwing different things at you that you can't make sense of," what's going to happen is the behaviour is going to escalate a lot. If you're nice and consistent and you say, "Every day we get up, we have breakfast, we get dressed, we brush our teeth, we get on the bus, we're going to school," it's not going to be completely perfect and easy. People are still having difficulties there. Dogs are still going to have difficulties even if you're super consistent sometimes. But it gets easier and it gets more comfortable for them and for you.
So I'm not going to label Atlas statistic, but do you think that your understanding of working with autistic people has helped you with Atlas?
100%.
Well, once we started listening to it, because we decided to go, all of that experience that we've both got, we'll just ignore that and we'll listen to the trainers who haven't actually met our dog in real life and don't seem to actually understand him. And once we went, "That was stupid, should we just do all that stuff that we know?"
Yeah. And that's like, he particularly is a very clear case where like I'm like, all of the work I used to do for challenging behaviour and people with challenging behaviour and people with autism applies to him very directly. Most dogs aren't quite as a direct comparison, but
He really doesn't suffer change easily, does he?
We've seen that this month, haven't we? It's been really tricky.
change, touch, like other sensory things, food changes, like
Tactile.
yeah.
And do you think it's become more apparent because you've got a second dog to compare?
Well,
That's your first, wasn't he?
and all the dogs, I mean, we've met 200 dogs in the last few days, and I'm still looking at him going, "Oh, buddy, you're a very quirky dude." Even though he's now making amazing choices, you can still see there's that underlying something there.
And why do you think I'm reluctant to use the word autistic when it comes to dogs?
Well, I think, again, it's another label, and I think we've always been hesitant about saying, "I won't put it on his Instagram," or say there's similarities, but
A lot of people compare their dogs to Atlas and say, "My dog's just like Atlas."
and I think it's interesting when you meet him and you see the layers of that. A lot of the mentee trainers see him and they're like, "Oh, I see."
I think that's it as well. Like we say, lots of people compared to Atlas, and I don't say this to be big-headed because I'd much rather Atlas was like other dogs. But for the most part, you don't see, like Jess said, like you don't see dogs like Atlas a lot. He was very extreme in his behaviours, very extreme in his responses. For me, he's the young person that you'd be like, "We need specialist intervention here. We need."
But you didn't know that at the time because Yeah, because you just went to regular trainers
Yeah.
who give you regular advice about ignoring or chastising, which might work with some dogs. Of course, you can bully some individuals into behaving, and you can ignore some behaviours and they will go away if the underlying needs of the dog are met. But you're all going to get many dogs, as we know, because we're meeting a lot of them. If we've gone, I don't think we've met anybody who hasn't seen a handful of trainers already. We're not meeting any virgin dogs just now that it all have patterns of behaviour, and you can almost tell by watching the handling skills of what kind of trainer they've gone to as well. And they all seem to be really surprised when I'm saying, use your body, don't have a lead, don't not have.
We've not met a single person this week, have we, that's gone, oh yeah, I'm already doing that.
We have, but it's the people that have already come to speak.
It's the new person. Yeah, it's not mainstream.
No, it isn't. And I think the reason for that is because we're very much driven by control. And so our next podcast is going to be on obedience versus what I call passive engagement. No, that's not what I call it, organic engagement. And so how we can get the dog on side without doing any training at all. And training is absolutely valuable. Obedience is brilliant. You can use it for certain bits. But as we've seen, it's not going to get you to where you want to be unless you have an understanding of how to create a relationship without any tools. Just you and the dog, no food, no collars. How do you deal with that? So we'll discuss that next time.
And if you're wondering, if you're sitting there thinking, I had a dog that I thought was fear aggressive and now I've got some questions, luckily for you, we have a whole community full of resources that are there to help. So we hope this has been interesting. Like, subscribe, and do all of the things that you do when you're on YouTube. Thanks. Maze balls.
Good.
Very nice.
It wasn't noisy.
I know. Well, I've got an app so I can run it through. That's why.
Like is directional, so like other than the big door, most of that won't pick up